Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. We are here today with the official ban list for Set 19 Fighters Ambition. I honestly can't believe it, just based on what I've already seen of this ban list. I had a feeling it was coming out today, as did many of you guys, although it's a little bit weird that they released the ban list without officially showing the full set, and by that I mean we just haven't seen the last two SCRs. I'm pretty sure it's the only thing we're missing from the main set. But that doesn't really matter all that much. If they're good, you're just going to play them over whatever current FCR you play in your current color decks. But yeah, today we're going over the Set 19 ban list. Drop down in the comments below what you feel about this ban list, because it is very, very divisive. This ban list is going to make a lot of people happy and make a lot of people really upset. I guess we'll go through and see how I feel about it as we read through this. Now, this announcement says this is basically live, effective immediately. And that is not going to be the case though for this weekend's tournaments. So if you're playing in tournaments this weekend, including the webcam regionals, this ban list is not live as far as the Facebook post goes from David Fashbinder. So basically this is live starting Monday, or you can start playing this at your local game store this weekend, however you guys want to go about it. But if you're playing in an official Dragon Ball regional this weekend, it is not legal. This ban list is not legal for that. But let's go right on into the ban list and see what they decided to do. So, announcement: ban limited errata card updates. Greetings, Dragon Ball Super card game fans. On October 28, 2022, 2 ban cards, 1 limited card, and 5 errata cards will be added to the ban limited errata list. You guys can see we start off strong with Goku Heartfelt Plea. Now, before we get into the reasoning, this is one that I don't think anyone really saw coming. This is a card that hasn't really been on the chopping block ever since it got limited to 1. I mean, it got limited to 1, and some decks played it. It was annoying when your opponent drew it, but otherwise, people didn't really care all that much. I haven't seen a post about this card in so long, but let's see their reasoning. Reason: the presence of BT18 SS4 Goku Heartfelt Plea has been monitored since it was first limited. Due to the high power level of Zenkai cards making this card easier to play than before, we decided to ban this card. So I guess as far as Zenkai goes, you could technically play this in Sin, sort of, but that'd be kind of weird, because you have to hold your Awaken off until turn 3 to really effectively play this, if you were going to sacrifice your Omega Shenron. And in Gogeta, you could play this card if you're playing Rushing Warrior Pan, I think is what it's called, the really old starter deck promo. I don't think Heartfelt Plea was in any super competitive builds of Gogeta and Sin. Again, it was just more of like a luck stacky card than anything. I'm pretty much fine with this card being banned, except for the fact that it's got some of the best art in the game, both its original art and its reprints. So that's kind of sad. It'll just sit in my collection binder forever, but I think this is a fine hit. Not a big deal, really. But then we move on to New Ruler, which is definitely a crazy one. Now, I talked about this in my ban list prediction video. I didn't totally think they were going to go with this, but it seems like they finally decided to chop the axe with this card. So, reason: the presence of King Piccolo New Ruler has been monitored since it was first limited. In order to increase diversity in deck building, we have decided to ban this card. Now, I don't really like that reasoning. I think it's just a very simple tagline they were able to put here to kind of just say, hey, here's a reason, like, get over it. I don't like that reason at all, because, I mean, when you have a good generic card in a color, you're gonna play it if it's that good, right? And just by banning it, okay, cool, I'm not gonna play it. If there's no good generic card to replace it, yeah, I mean, you're technically increasing deck diversity, but it's just a matter of creating generic cards versus archetype cards. So I don't think that reason makes a whole lot of sense. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely a good hit to the overall power of red in general. So I mean, I'm kind of for it. Red was a bit too strong in this meta, and I think this is a good way to kind of hamper the color's power overall. But we're gonna see more of that as we go through this. So limited cards, we're limiting Yamcha Merciless Barrage. This is definitely one that I think comes out of left field the most, maybe even more so than Heartfelt Plea, because Yamcha is so weird, man. Yamcha has its formats where it is like the most broken counterplay, but then it has its formats where it's like super unplayable and just not good at all, right? This format in particular, where red has been so strong in set 18, it's not been a great format for Yamcha. Like, it's not very good against SS4 Gogeta, because it doesn't really kill any of their guys on play, especially considering that most of Gogeta's main threats, the 2 arrival guys, basically, I forget what they're called, but they have deflect, so Yamcha doesn't really affect them, so it doesn't really do much against Gogeta at all. It is pretty good against Sin, though, because you can interrupt their Ice and Nova plays, because those are basically one energy dual attackers. So if you're trying to protect your Unison or just protect your life total, Yamcha was really good in that regard at stopping 2 attacks per turn. Let's read their reasoning, though. So Yamcha Merciless Barrage inhibits the power level of decks aiming to play many battle cards. including several strategies present in Zenkai series. In order to allow those decks to be playable, we are limiting this card. So I mean, that's a fair point, because this card just absolutely destroys King Piccolo. It absolutely destroys Green Ginyu with the new support from the anniversary box. It's really good against Green Gogeta BR, although that deck is still terrible by all standards and measures. But yeah, this card was the type, like I said, when it was broken, it was broken. It was terrible, it was terrible. But in the right matchups, like, it just eliminates your board presence every turn. And really, that's against decks that only spam 15Ks, which again, by like the standards of the meta we've had for probably over a year at this point, spamming 15Ks is like not that great. I mean, look back to King Piccolo. That deck was pretty good at spamming 15Ks, but it did it for free on both players' turns and drew a book for a hand. So that was a bit of a different story, a bit of an exception. But yeah, like the decks I mentioned just a minute ago, this card would outright demolish them. So I guess this one makes sense. I'm not really too upset about this one. Now, what's interesting though is that red is going to be the color without a consistent free play card attached to their unison. Now, there's a couple things to talk about here. One, if you want consistent free play attached to your unison, you got to play a 3-cost red unison and play Videl. Videl is still a really strong card, but at least that card can be interacted with via counterplays. So there is some outplay to Videl. Yamcha, there wasn't really anything like that. I wonder if a Yamcha's ever been cooler counter-countered or baby counter-countered. Probably not, because Yamcha's not that great in those matchups. But that's the only way to stop Yamcha, is to counter-counter it. But yeah, besides that, red is going to be the only color without a consistent counterplay attached to its unisons. But we might see a very strong movement away from unisons in the metagame because of a number of factors, right? So one, if the format slows down, that could mean that green will get a little bit better with a Faded Rivals combo, being able to snipe any unison they want off the board. Two, we all saw the Black Smoke Dragon coming out in set 19, which just snipes 2-cost unisons. So that's going to make those unreliable as it is. So basically, if you're not already playing a 3-cost or higher unison, it's very unlikely your unison is going to stick around with all the different effects we have in the game that remove them, and even the Sin archetype, which I still think is going to be a good deck. That deck is still going to be able to kill unisons via effects, so probably not the worst thing that red's losing Yamcha. I think what they're kind of doing here is just putting red and setting red into that aggressive role in the meta, where it's like, hey, if you're going to be this super aggressive color, which we're still going to knock down by a few pegs, we're still going to take away New Ruler, but if you're going to be this hyper aggressive color, you can't really have like this crazy form of defense in the form of Yamcha, and a card that we'll see in just a second. But anyways, moving along, errata to Senzu Bean. Okay, I know I keep saying this, but this might be the craziest part of this ban list. I mean, who would have thought? Like, there were so many times throughout the game's history people were talking about hitting Senzu Bean, and over the past like year, maybe 6 months, I think people kind of put that conversation down because they didn't do it over the first 6 years of the game. Why would they do it now? But they finally decided to errata Senzu Bean, and it's been an errata that we've called for and talked about for such a long time, both on this channel and in the community. So let's see their reasoning. Senzu Bean has always been a powerful card in the Dragon Ball Super card game, but with the new interactions present in Zenkai series, players are able to greatly extend their turn and play strength, that's funny, by switching energy to active mode on their turns. This change will allow BT153 to still be a very powerful defensive tool for blue decks while eliminating its offensive capabilities. So it's been errata to say it is only usable during your opponent's turn. Again, this is an errata we've talked about for such a long time. Again, the reasoning is like weird because this has been a thing in other formats. This has not only been a thing in Zenkai series, but for whatever reason, they finally decided to pull the trigger on Senzu Bean, and I think I'm okay with it. There's one thing about this game that I've thought about recently that kind of sucks, and it's that there's not really much of a reason to splash colors in your deck, and that is what truly kills deck diversity or deck building diversity in this game. You know, they've printed all these decks for the past several years with Unison Warrior block, and they're still pretty much doing it in Zenkai, where they're very monocolor oriented in mind when they're designed. You can tell they're just purely designed for monocolor. Cards say you have to have monocolor energy, or they just don't make these generic cards that are splashable. Bean was that only card where it was worth running the risk of playing a bunch of 1 energy 10k combos to charge multicolor energy to then activate Senzu Bean. That was worth it because of how good Senzu Bean is. I kind of wish there were some cards that were not as good as Bean, but still made splashing other colors worth it in your decks. Maybe that's something they'll do, you know, in the future design of the game. I hope that's the case. But yeah, for what it was, Bean was making blue the only splashable color. So until they're ready to make cards that make splashing a thing, I think this is pretty appropriate for Bean. So what does this mean for Bean and blue decks? It's a sideboard card, man. It's a sideboard card for the King Piccolos of the world, the sideboard card for the Green Guineas of the world. You want this card in blue when your opponent is going crazy on you at 15, 20k aggro, but you don't really want this card in your main deck, I don't think, personally at least. Anyways, though, moving along, we have Violent Rays, another crazy hit, man. Like, I don't think, I could be wrong, but this might be the first time they've ever hit a defensive card on the ban list, and especially for a Floodgate. Like, Bean, you could consider a defensive card, but the most broken part of Bean was its offensive capability, so they errated it to being defensive only. I think this might be the first time they've errated a defensive card like Violent Rays, but I could be wrong. So, reason. When Violent Rays were released, few strategies revolved around attacking with multiple battle cards at 20k power or more in a turn. Since the release of Zenkai series, Violent Rays disrupts several deck strategies and has proven more powerful than intended. This change will still allow red deck players to stop the highest power attack plays, but not interfere with all strategies. I mean, that part is like not true. When this card came out, like Dark Broly came out, Red Broly BR came out, those attack with lots of 20k and higher, but whatever, it doesn't matter. So the new errata text is basically the same thing, except you're not limiting your opponent from attacking with 20k or higher anymore. You're limiting them from attacking with 30k and higher. Now, especially to the unison part of that effect, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because I don't know if there even is a unison in the game that has 30k power. Like, that's just not something you're going to face down, like, practically ever. So maybe that part could have stayed the same, but I do understand, again, to a point where let's make red the aggressive color and not give it all this insane defense. I do think that is relatively fair. I don't know. I'm sad to see this go because now red mirrors are going to be a little bit more difficult to navigate. But again, I don't hate this errata. More so I hate it because, like, the Violent Ray Altar is just not nearly as good anymore and probably not playable. Like, you'd only play Violent Rays now if there's, like, a Dark Broly in the format. Like, I don't even think you want this card against Red Sin, even though they can technically play 2 Omegas per turn, or at least during one turn they can play 2 Omegas. I don't even think you want Violent Rays for that case. Maybe as, like, a 2 of in the side deck, but yeah, this is definitely a huge hit to red. So red is just really becoming the aggro color with much more susceptibility on the clapback, which is probably a pretty good thing balance-wise. We talked about aggro a lot on this channel over the past years, and if you're going to be a super aggressive color like red is, you should be more susceptible to a clapback. That does make for better balance, so I do appreciate that a little bit. Then we have an errata to Beerus the Visitors. So Beerus the Visitors printed, allowed a player to draw many cards per turn with high consistency. This interaction was not intended, so we're issuing an errata to eliminate it. So I didn't talk about this in the prediction video, but a lot of people in the comments mentioned it. It's a very fair point that this should have been touched, and they basically changed the text to say, well, you have to place this in your energy in order to draw the card, which is not how it worked previously. So good change. Now the reboot Goku deck just won't be drawing a degenerate amount of cards anymore. Then we have an errata to Vegeta Resolve Renewed. This is the one that I don't like. I don't like this errata at all. But so the reason is Resolve Renewed became used in almost all red decks in Zenkai series. It was also used in most decks in Unison Warrior towards the end of it at least. But in order to promote deck building diversity, we have decided to errata this card. So post errata if your leader is a Vegito. And then the rest of the effects the same thing. So this is no longer Red's answer to Oceanus, no longer Red's answer to Robotic Riposte. This card is severely nerfed, but it does shine a really interesting light on Red Set 2 Vegito, especially with the Anniversary Box support. That deck was already pretty interesting. There's a lot of people saying that deck's going to make a big impact on the meta. This is definitely going to be one more reason to play Vegito. Like, Vegito being the only red deck that can answer, again, the Oceanus of the world, the Robotic Riposte of the world, for very cheap, is going to be a big draw to that deck. So that's the one, like, silver lining I'm okay with this about. But now I think that if you're hitting all of Red's defenses and limiting Red's ability to answer floodgates, that just might make Red a bit too weak. But to be fair to Red, they still have other answers to floodgates. They're just worse. So, for example, you have Beerus Ball, but you gotta be at 4 or less life to do the same thing as Vegeta, and it's an extra card. So that's also not as great. There's some maybe other cards we can look at. There's like Begrudging Allies, which is also an option. So we'll have to look at those options for Red, but this is definitely going to be sorely missed in Red aggro decks. And then we have Broly Crown Retribution, I think, wrapping up our erratas here. So we have the reasoning. Crown Retribution has proved too powerful when played without paying its energy cost. We decided to errata this card in order to balance it. That's perfectly fair. Permanent, this card can't be played by skills from any area. So no more playing Broly Crown off of your SS4 Gogeta Unisons. Again, I think this is a perfectly fair change. This card was a bit too powerful to be played by skills. I think it's fine that you have to pay 1 for this to look at your opponent's hand and take their best card, 20k or less. I think that's perfectly fine. So overall, I mean, I guess with the changes made here, I'm pretty much okay with all of them except for Resolve Renewed. Yeah, I mean, new ruler, it's fine. Time to go. Like, red does not need 2 overwhelms per turn. Yamcha, it's a bit too strong when it's too strong. It sucks when it sucks, but I mean, I guess it's too polarizing of a card to keep around. Senzu Bean, long time coming for this one, man. I can't believe they finally did it after all this time. Violent Rays, yeah, red's defense is much less than it was. And no more degenerate draws for Ramp Goku. Resolve Renew, this is the only one that I wish didn't happen, but it is what it is. So overall, guys, I want in the comments below what you think about this ban list. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.